listeners and viewers. Thank you for joining me today for the second episode of the first series of my podcast, In This World, a podcast for life's journey through tough times. In these first few episodes, we're talking about coping with loss, and I'm your podcast host, Lori Jackson. Thank you for joining me. When I went through those first few weeks after my son had transitioned from this world to the next, I found it to be the most difficult experience of my life. And for any of you who've experienced loss of a very close member of your family, a child, a spouse, a parent, a brother or sister, you do understand when I say that it's like a part of you is missing. And for me, I had a security blanket that I carried around with me. It was my son's shirt. They say that sense of smell is the most triggering of all of our senses as far as triggering memories go. And the shirt smelled like the cologne that he wore and smelled like him to me. And I found it amazingly comforting. I just needed to have him as close to me as possible. And that shirt was the closest thing physically that I had to that. So in my waking time, as I would, rest or watch television or have visitors over, and in my sleeping time, I carried that shirt with me and just held it close to my core and to my heart. To say I was heartbroken is true. My heart ached in a way that I had never felt before. The pain was so strong that I truly felt my heart was broken. And holding on to that shirt like a security blanket gave me some release from that pain, from the anxiety that I was feeling in those first days and actually the first few weeks after my son had passed away. And I think that, everyone does grieve differently, but the idea of having something to hold on to, something to keep close is a good thing. So we were talking in the last episode about coping mechanisms or ways to cope. And there's one more that I'm going to add to the list. To this day, I still have, that shirt taken out from time to time. And it was a cowboy Western style shirt that I had bought him previously. And he loved the Western style. He loved just cowboy stuff and the rodeo. And so it definitely made me smile every time I think about him and think about how much he loved that aspect of his life. So, what I want to talk about today is my life stopped and the world kept moving. In those first weeks, days, months, I really did feel like my life had stopped. That this event had impacted my life so much that it couldn't just keep moving on as it had in the past. That this was a defining time frame for me. I needed to give myself the space, give myself time, allow myself to grieve and mourn and do whatever I needed to do to find a way. I was there in that process, but the rest of the world was still moving and going just as they had day in and day out before I experienced this loss. I found that to be hard. People's lives go on and work continues and bills need to be paid and life is moving on. But I really felt like I was not moving. I was just stopped in time. And again, I'd never felt that before, even though I had experienced loss before. In this particular case, this was different for me in the way I was experiencing it. So I took that time and I went through photographs and created a photograph book. My sister had come, and when we were preparing the memorial service, she put together this beautiful video. I want to say that it was a histography, and I don't know if that's actually a word, but it was my son's life history in photograph form. So I will call it a histography. And it was set to music. I chose the different songs that I know that he really liked and that resonated with me. And we set the video to music, and we actually did play it at his memorial service, and it was just amazing. And then I have that video now for the rest of my life to look at from time to time, and it does bring me great joy and memories and some tears too, because again, through this grieving process, I would say that especially early on, but less so over time, is that it was very much an emotional roller coaster. You know, the joy and the laughter of having those memories, and the heartbreak and sadness of knowing that I wouldn't see him again. I couldn't talk to him again. You know, it was again the most challenging thing I've ever experienced. So I created went through the photographs. I created a book of our family vacations that we really enjoyed. The first time I utilized Shutterfly was for my son's 25th birthday present. I gave him a photograph book of all of like the most amazing memories that we had from him growing up to his 25th birthday. And he really cherished that of all the gifts that I'd given him. And on his 25th birthday, I also gave him one of those fringe cowboy jackets and a wonderful Stetson hat. And he was very excited about that as well. But that photograph memory book, his girlfriend had told me he would take it out all the time and just look at it and smile and laugh. And he really enjoyed it. So I do have that book now. I did make sure that I recovered that, and I can look at it and hold the same book that he was holding while he was smiling and laughing. And again, these tangible things that he touched, that he wore, that he held, they do matter. It just gives us something that helps us be close, even though they're not with us anymore. And the other thing that I have been wearing is that I have a bracelet with my son's name on it, and I wear it every day. Of course, he's in my heart and in my prayers and in my thoughts every day. But it's just to feel something physical, and that gives me comfort. My son had also bought me for Mother's Day and my birthdays Pandora charms for Pandora bracelets. So, of course, I wear those all the time. Of course, I did before he had passed away. So, this was nothing new. But I, of course, would continue to do that. And, these are things that, again, just help me feel close to him. In those first few weeks, and I talked about how the world kept moving, but my life stood still. I was able to take time off from work. I was able to spend time going through, those childhood memories, and bring things down from the attic, boxes of his belongings from his childhood, all those memories, and just slowly, over a couple weeks, kind of look at them. Some things, boxes, honestly, I didn't get to for months. But the lock of his hair, the things from his birth, the announcement of his birth, those things gave me a lot of good memories. And so I cried and I smiled, and again was on that somewhat emotional roller coaster, some of which was self-inflicted, I suppose. But to be honest with you, it just felt like it just brought me close to him. And that's all I wanted, was just to feel close to him. I appreciated the flowers. I appreciated the cards. I appreciated the sentiments. I appreciated the visits. I appreciated the phone calls. Sometimes I wasn't ready to have a phone conversation, but I always listened to the messages and all those expressions of support were very meaningful at the time. I know that sometimes people say that they don't reach out because they don't know what to say and it's uncomfortable and awkward. And I understand that. And to be honest, most of the time when I spoke to people at the same time that they were obviously feeling very sad for me, I knew that it was also sad and emotionally difficult for them as well, because no one wants to have this conversation. No one wants to see their friend or their sister or their spouse suffer. And so I understood that it was always these like uncomfortable moments, especially early on in those first few weeks. But I would encourage you that if you are listening and you know someone who's experiencing this right now, who's experiencing loss, reach out, leave the message if they don't answer the phone, send the card, be present, ask if they wouldn't mind a visit. And if so, just go, and you don't have to say anything. Just sit together and listen. I was happy to have people who I could share stories about my son with at that time. I'm thankful for my husband. Of course, we had the same stories because we raised him together, and we could share those stories together and laugh and cry. And that was really, I'm so grateful for the blessing of having my husband help me through this time as well. So those first few weeks, again, all that expression of love, I felt it. I needed it and I appreciated it. So please don't hesitate. Take the opportunity, reach out. One of the most significant things that they talk about when people are grieving is the feeling of isolation. As I said, I felt like my life had just stopped, that it was standing still, and everybody else's lives were just going on as usual around me. And it felt isolating. And again, sometimes people don't want to reach out because, it is that uncomfortable conversation, but please reach out and step into that discomfort for a moment. And what you'll find is that in coming together at times like that, it strengthens both people. We both get something out of it. And so I do encourage people to reach out, and also to be very concerned about isolation. Don't isolate yourself. I know sometimes you just feel like you want to curl up in a ball and be left alone. And sometimes you need that, and that's okay, but not a lot. Allow people in. Allow that connection. It's very important. And then the other thing that I did, as we're going to wrap up here, is I started writing. So I did go out and buy myself a journal. I have it here. And not everybody's a journaler. And it's funny because I buy journals and then I start writing in them and I stop. And then a year later, I go back and say, oh gosh, I thought I had written more. And this was not unlike that. At the beginning, really, I couldn't even write. I could just put a couple words and that was it. And so I said, okay, that's enough. Just whatever it was that was on my mind, whatever I was feeling, those few words that expressed it, that's all I would write. And I'd put the book back down. And in 3 to 4 weeks, I was able then to start writing. And I was able to go back to those few words and use them as prompts to help me write and to pull from what I had been thinking and feeling in those first few weeks. So it's not like a journal has to be this long dissertation. It can literally just be a word or two in the moment. And that's all that you need to write. But I will say that in going back and looking at it now, it's helpful. It's helpful in giving me this opportunity to share with others what it's like to go through that grieving process, to experience that loss and find ways to get through it. And then one last thing that I want to say is I talked about the things that I was able to hold on to, things that I could touch, the tangible things, because I can't touch my son anymore. But it is important to know that I know where my son is. I didn't lose him. I've shared this with people before. I know where he is. And I'll share that in the next episode, how I know exactly where my son is, because God is good, and he helped me to understand where my son is right now. And what that means is I am not with him in this world anymore, but I will be with him again one day and for all eternity. So for that message, tune in next week, and God bless you all. Thank you for listening.